Howdy, y'all. I'm Dr. Jeff Jarvis. I'm joined by Kirby, and we are going to talk performance measures. So you are going to start seeing the performance measures that we report to the board. Every month we report this. Well, we want to share it with you because you're the ones who are actually doing this work, and we think it's important that you see what everybody else is seeing. I want to go over this, interpret how, or give you some information on how to interpret it. And we're going to go over how they're measured briefly. And then Kirby is going to talk to us about some of the ways that we can document better to improve our performance on these measures. I am involved with performance measures on a national basis. There's an organization called NMSQA, the National EMS Quality Alliance. We build a lot of these measures. And the whole reason we're doing it is because historically, in our profession, we measure things because they're easy, not because they are important to patients. The entire mission of NMSQA is to build performance measures to enhance our ability to improve things that matter to patients. So, since we're talking about measuring what's important and what matters, let's go over some of the graphics that you'll see. So the first thing, we want to be able to see all of our performance measures and at a glance, get an idea of how well we're performing. So Buck, even though he absolutely positively hates making gauges, is constantly improving these gauges. He is creating these so that at a glance you can see where we're doing on all measures and get an idea of the proportion that we're killing it on versus those that we need to improve on. And as you can see, even from this image, we're doing better than, we're like really doing well on most of our measures and have some room to improve on some of them. And on some of them, I want you to know the places where we are not beating national benchmarks or national goals, we have improvement efforts underway to do just that and to improve. So let's get into the measures. We're going to start with a couple of cardiac arrest measures, and because our approach to cardiac arrest begins in dispatch and what they do matters also, we measure those. So cardiac arrest 01 is, of all cardiac arrest cases, we want to see those that our dispatchers correctly recognized. We're at 84%. We have some room to improve, so we're continuing to work on that. That's what this is. And it's measured, and down at the bottom of this will give you a little indication of how it's measured. And I just want to take this first one as an example to describe this visualization. This is what I call the Buck visualization, or the BV. Up in the top of it, it describes the measure, and down at the bottom it gives you a little more detail about the measure. In the upper left-hand corner, it gives you the system performance, and all of these are system measures, not MedStar measures, not Fort Worth Fire measures, not Haltom City. They're the system because that's what our patients care about. So in the upper left-hand corner, you're going to see a month's worth of performance, and then underneath that, you will either see an AHA goal if there is no national benchmark data, or where there is national benchmark data, you'll see that. And then underneath, what you see is what's called a run chart. So we're looking at the performance by month over the last roughly 12-month period. And the idea there is so that you can see trends. Are we staying the same? Are we improving? Or are we getting worse? The one thing I will caution you about is looking at isolated data points. That doesn't tell us as much as looking at trends. So that's what we're looking at visually. Two more things that Buck does in that run chart is, you'll notice there's a little dotted line. The dotted line is where our average across that period is. And then on one side will be green, the other side will be red. So in this case, any performance below that line, that's our goal. I'm sorry, it's not our average, it's our goal. Anything under that is not good. Anything above that is good. And then over to the right, what you see in the bar graphs is our performance versus national either benchmarks or goals, and that is averaged over the last 12 months. So it's the number that you see is where we did, say, in December, since this is December's. And then the bar chart is how we've done in the 12 months leading up to that. All right, so that's cardiac arrest 01, and that is the Buck visualization. Next up is a time measure, cardiac arrest 02. This is the median time between 911 answer when it hits RPSAP and the recognition of cardiac arrest. The goal is less than 90 seconds. We're at around 101 seconds. And you can see we've had a fair amount of variation in that, but over the past year, we're still above where we want it to be. This is one of the big improvement efforts that we have underway right now. The final dispatch measure, if you will, is cardiac arrest 03, and that is the proportion of those patients that we recognize are in cardiac arrest that we give TCPR instructions to. Ma'am, I need you to get the patient on the floor, get on their chest, and go hard and fast. So that's an indication. We've been smoking this for the past year. In December, we were at 95%. That's 20 points higher than the national goal. And we've been at that level for the past 12 months, if not longer. So doing a great job on that. The last, I lied to you. I did have another dispatch measure in there.
Yep.
Just one more. There's this
Pretty
one more
important
thing.
one, too.
It's an important one. This is how long between 911 call and in cardiac arrest, how long between that 911 call and our first compression that the dispatcher told our folks to do, or the patients to do.
The caller, yeah.
The caller, yeah. Yeah, thank you, Kirby. Goal less than 150 seconds. In December, we were at 232, and you can see over the last year, we've been around 209. And you can see there's a fair amount of variation there. Big efforts underway right now to improve this, so I have a lot of faith in our folks in the comm center, and I know we're going to be knocking this down. Now, the only reason that those are important is to improve survival. So let's take a look at our survival. Specifically, we're measuring Utstein survival. So I have on the slide there a description of what Utstein survival is. Utstein cases are those patients that are most likely to benefit from a highly organized EMS system. So for example, the patient who is in a systole in a nursing home with inoperable brain cancer who was going to die, nothing we're going to do is going to save them. On the other hand, a 22-year-old basketball player who drops in front of a crowd, somebody immediately gets on the chest, somebody else grabs an AED, they zap it, that person should survive.
Absolutely.
If we have a well-functioning system. That is Utstein. It's witnessed arrest of cardiac etiology, and the initial rhythm is VFib. So I think it's helpful here. Kirby, why don't you tell us a little bit about what that cardiac etiology means?
Sure. So for a cardiac etiology, we're talking about a patient that is truly going into cardiac arrest from a cardiac event that occurs, right? So these would be our STEMI patients or anyone with any type of myocardial infarction that happens and then leads to their cardiac arrest. Those are the types of patients that we're going to tell our documentation when in a cardiac arrest from a cardiac etiology.
Yeah,
right?
so these would be patients, you mentioned STEMI, that's a huge reason. People are having an occlusion of that LAD and they go into VFib and drop. Other great examples are some of the things that we are looking for in a 12-lead EKG in a patient who has syncope, for example. Things like HOCM, WPW, Brugada syndrome, prolonged QT.
Yes.
Those are the things, those put people at high risk for sudden cardiac arrest. So just because they're in cardiac arrest doesn't mean that that arrest is truly from a cardiac event.
Right.
As an example, our nursing home who may have nursing home resident who may have sepsis. Even though they're in cardiac arrest, that's not a cardiac etiology.
Right.
So, and we'll take care of that. You can document these things. and but we'll go in and take a look at it also.
Yeah, so your documentation absolutely helps us whenever we are entering these cases into the database that we put this information into. And what we'll do is have your chart and understand that you did document the etiology, which hopefully here is a medical etiology. This patient was a witnessed cardiac arrest patient and was found in a shockable rhythm. So whenever you do have these patients, it's extremely important that you document those appropriate things in the right section.
It really helps us identify the right cases.
Correct.
So in terms of our performance, I will tell you, back in 2016, 17, we were well above national average. We were doing really well on this.
Very good.
The pandemic hit, the plague happened, the before times didn't line up with the after times. We have been substantially below national performance since then. We have started over the last year working on improvement efforts because our performance really was not acceptable. We had to improve it, and thank God we have been. So our first initiative was around mechanical CPR. I know y'all worked really hard on that before I got here. The intervention we did that I think really started showing this improvement is we delayed implementation of the LUCAS, and some of our departments have those with the ability to do so have started sending 2 engines again
Double engine
to
response.
our response. And we have a really nice paper that tells us if you have more than 8 responders, clinicians on scene, the odds of survival are better. Really makes a huge difference. In June, we're rolling out a new package of changes around cardiac arrest. We're starting to test those now. You may see them. Those are all aimed at improving this. So for the last several months, you can see we've been above national. In December, we were at 44%. So we are continuing to improve this.
Yes.
Love it. Let's talk airway. This is my favorite thing ever. The airway improvement, the biggest thing that you've seen around airway improvement is, well, starting before I got here, was really focused on unrecognized failed airways, using capnography to confirm tube placement. So you'll see the impact of that in a measure. But the biggest thing we've done to impact our first pass intubation success and our safe intubation success has been around implementation of DSI and RSI and our goal-directed protocols. This measure is something we refer to frequently as -1A. The official name of the measure is Airway 01, first pass intubation success without hypoxia or hypotension. We call it -1A. -1A stands for definitive airway sans hypoxia or hypotension on the first attempt. When you spell it out like that, oh my God, is it painful, but it's easier to say -1A.
Yes.
I think we have talked to everybody about this before. I'm not going to belabor that. I just want to talk about the measure. The way we're measuring this is not a one-to-one match with our protocol, and that's intentional. The protocol is heavily evidence-based. There is one area where this measure is more difficult than our protocol, and that is specifically what is around the time period for the peri-intubation period. So when we say without hypotension or hypoxia, this measure looks at the period 5 minutes before intubation and 5 minutes after intubation. Now our protocol says don't intubate if you can't get the SATs up and keep them up for 3 minutes before intubation. Good evidence to suggest 3 minutes. When we developed this measure on a national level, the consensus was 5 minutes. In other words, I lost the argument. I will tell you, I'm going back when we maintain this issue at the next meeting, arguing for 3, but right now it's 5. As you look at this, I want you to see national performance. This is national performance, 24%. And that is 24% as documented in the chart. Our performance, that 56, where we're doing well better than national, is not from the chart. Although what you document is important, Kirby takes every one of these and looks at the monitor file and extracts information. Now, we went back before we started reporting this and we looked at what the value would be if we just use chart data versus what the monitors tell us. And what we found is looking at the monitors results in performance about 10% lower than when it comes directly from the chart. Now, that doesn't mean that what you're putting in the chart is not accurate. We know that what you're doing is hitting the import button, and that's what I do when I'm in the field. That's what you do.
Yep.
There's no other way to do that. But when it imports data, it's not reporting second by second data. It's not reporting what you can see on the monitor files. It's taking an average from every 30 seconds and importing that. So you miss some things in the imported data.
Yes.
All right. However you measure it, it's hard as hell to get. You can see that 24% national. We're at 56%, and keep in mind, we've only had about 2.5 months of the new protocol. So we were around national, and now we are doing substantially better. I am exceedingly proud of the work that y'all are doing with this. We're taking much, much better care of our patients as a result.
Oh, yeah.
Well, let's talk Airway O2. This is a portion of that. And this is, did you adequately pre-oxygenate your patients? This is a 3-minute period as opposed to the prior measure. And not surprisingly, we're smoking the hell out of this one. Smoking! It's probably not appropriate to use the term smoking in reference
Maybe
to
not.
an airway.
Yeah. Either way, we're doing good.
Really well with this. Y'all are following the protocol really, really well, and this is a huge representation of that. That national performance of 25, I think that is dead on accurate. Historically, we thought the only way to fix hypoxia was to intubate, and now we know that's not the appropriate thing. We're doing great with this. So we have a slide, and by we I mean Kirby. She put something together called a Kirby chart that allows us to take a look at an entire event in one glance and tell whether we made our -1A measure or not. Kirby, since this is a Kirby chart, why don't you walk us through this?
Sure. So you will receive these charts anytime you do perform a intubation through the DSI process. We put these together and email them out with some other feedback in the email itself as well. So I just want to make sure that we all kind of have a clear understanding of what these charts are, how they represent your data, and what you're looking at when you do get sent these charts. Now, this comes from your Zoll file. Thankfully, Zoll is, automatically putting these charts together, but the annotations are the pieces that I add. So when you see the annotations...
That's why it's not called a Zoll chart, it's called a Kirby chart.
That's right. So you'll see the annotations, which is what I add to it to indicate what your documentation reflects and what I also find in the monitor file. This is a great case to use as an example, and a shout out to Jessica for her performance on this case. You can see where her medication administrations were based off of the times in her chart. You can see where the other medications we use in this process, like pressors, were given based off of when she put them in her chart. And I correlate those to where that information is in the monitor file. So that explains the red pieces of the information you're looking at with the dashed lines and the little boxes. Now you'll also see a shaded area here. And when we talk about -1A, in first pass intubation success without hypotension or hypoxia, that little gray area back there is that time period. So if you want to look at just a glance of real quickly whether or not you were successful at your -1A or achieved your intubation on the first pass without hypotension or hypoxia, you can look at that area. You will see the green line showing your blood pressures. You will see the dark blue line showing your heart rate. The light blue line shows your SpO2 measures, and you'll see the pink line that shows your end titles. So it's pretty clear from each of these lines what is happening within the call. You can see when you're intubating, and you can see when you get a successful intubation as well. We did add the -1A down there at the bottom for you, so if you ever forget any of this information, just look down at the bottom. You'll know where to look for what we're talking about with this measurement specifically.
I love this chart. I really can. I can get everything I need to know about it just from looking at that chart.
They're pretty great.
I've been sharing this every time I talk on this. I want everybody to use the term Kirby chart when they see this, because this really is impressive. When I share this with other folks involved with quality improvement, they're like, oh, how do we get a Kirby? I'm like, keep your damn hands off. She's ours.
I'm dedicated.
All right, so we mentioned the other improvement effort that y'all started way before I got here about confirming placement with waveform capnography. We are, well, I was about to say smoking again. Again, bad Jeff.
You may as well just keep saying it.
Well, I might as well.
At this point.
Oh, I know. On the slide, I said destroying it. I had to mix it up a little bit.
There you go.
We are really doing well on this. 98% in February. We've been averaging for the past 12 months, 97%. National average is 3%.
It's pretty low.
And if you're thinking, oh my God, that can't be right, most places are confirming ET tube placement with those stupid colorimetric devices. Not us, doing really well. Keep up the great work, y'all. All right, let's talk some STEMI care,
Yeah.
shall we?
Yeah.
All right, y'all know that in patients who are having a STEMI, an occlusion myocardial infarction, aspirin can help disrupt platelet aggregation and can save lives. The number needed to treat to save one additional life is 47. Aspirin is important that we give it to them sometime while we're taking care of them. So this measure looks at the proportion of patients that are you diagnosed with a STEMI. So it's in your impression, or you called a STEMI alert. So that's our denominator, our bottom number. Our numerator is that you gave aspirin, or you documented a reason not to give aspirin. Now, these measures are automatically done, which means with 200,000 calls a year, we can't go through every single narrative to build these. We'd never get anything done.
No.
So one thing that I want to point out for any procedure or medication is when you go to document it, there will be a little arrow, not an arrow,
Exclamation.
a minus sign. A
Oh,
little
yes.
circle with a
yes,
minus
the
sign.
minus sign.
If you're wondering what the hell that is, and I certainly was, because this is a NMSIS thing and I didn't get it, click that button and it'll have a bunch of things like, why didn't you give it? I always thought that was stupid because, well, why would I document I gave it only to document why I didn't do it?
Right.
It's for things like this. So let's say the patient has a deathly anaphylactic reaction to aspirin. Okay, well, probably you don't want to give that to them. But if you document, go down under medication, select aspirin, click the negative button and say contraindicated,
Yep.
then we get credit for this. So that's how you can help us. Clearly, we don't need any help with this because we're doing really well with
Pretty
it.
good.
100%. That is an improvement. We saw that improvement about 2 months ago, and it's been holding so far. So far, so good. Now, one of the areas we're not doing so well on is getting that 12-lead ECG within 10 minutes of first patient contact. So the way this is measured is within from the time you make contact, MedStar makes contact.
Yes.
Right now, we're not measuring first medical contact, which we should, but we can't right now.
Right.
We'll get to that. We're
working
on
on
our
it.
improvement. MedStar gets there. There needs to be a 12-lead ECG documented in the chart within that 10 minutes to count in this measure. The denominator, again, the bottom number is primary or secondary impression of STEMI,
Yep.
or you called a STEMI alert. Now, in February, we were at 67. You can see we're bouncing all over the place,
Yep.
but predominantly not meeting the goal of the Heart Association of 75. I think we should be well above 85 to 90. You can see that we've been averaging over the last year 64%.
Right.
So we are going through some ways to help improve this by using the 12 leads our first responders do, by clarifying that you can do a 12-lead ECG even as a basic,
Yep.
and you should. So one way to do this is for our first responders to get the 12-lead, and even if we haven't figured out how to transmit, how to upload, do anything else, when MedStar shows up, just hand them the 12-lead, and MedStar, it's important that you document it, but it's important that you document the time on that 12-lead and don't put prior to arrival. Prior to arrival, it excludes it from the measure.
Correct.
And you don't get credit for the good work you're doing.
Right.
So,
Well, Jeff, I think you've been talking a lot. We
I
might
do
need a
that.
break. Let's go ahead and take a break from this one for now.
Let's do that. We'll take a break. Try to keep your attention focused on these. We'll come back with another episode to go over some more performance measures. Thanks, y'all.